right?
Yeah, you're coming in loud and clear.
Okay. So, an introduction to open licenses, and let's get into this talk can be a little bit dry, so I've tried to include a few questions throughout the presentation to sort of add some interest and keep you on your toes. So, slides in a moment. Open or something. Okay, I guess something worked. So this is my disclaimer that I'm not a lawyer, but I wanted to be able to share some information with you that I have mostly from the Creative Commons website, and make a conversation about how people are thinking about Creative Commons licenses. There are several types of open licenses, and I'm talking specifically about Creative Commons licenses, which can be used for pretty much any format except computer software and hardware. And bigger folks have their own licenses that work better for their content. You access this same information from creativecommons.org. Their FAQ section is pretty fabulous. And if you want to really get into the details of Commons, the wiki is the place to go for that. I'm going to make you start thinking right from the start. So I have a question for you. What do you think Creative Commons licenses are about? Is it A, B, or C, or something else entirely? If you could chat into the box and let us know what you think. Have it coming in?
I got another guess of B when they just sent it to me. And another one says all of the above.
For me, my vote would be all of the above. Because commenting, though, you may not agree, but I think it is limiting how things can be shared, because each of the 6 licenses does have a limit. So we'll talk some more what those are. Definitely provide a standard way of talking about and communicating with others how we want to share. And the third one, that third quote there under C, is that's used to talk about why we have all rights reserved copyright. But I think that's also applicable to Creative Commons. Commons does promote the progress of science and useful arts. And you have to have the copyright in order to apply a Creative Commons license to work that creates. So I think that's applicable as well. Other things, the people put Creative Commons license on their work is really because they want to share. So clearly it's about sharing and reusing content. And I mentioned before, you can only, if you're putting the license on something, you can only put that license on it if you own the copyright or the rights to do so. If you want to use a Creative Commons license, you don't need to register to do it. You can just put the text on there, or if you're using a website that allows you to add, or software that allows you to add some metadata, you can do that. And there's a tool called the C Licenser User Tool that we'll take a look at a little bit probably at the end. And if you want to apply these licenses to your own work, just keep in mind that they're not revocable. You could change the license, but it doesn't revoke the original terms. In practice, people tend to use whatever's currently listed as the license. If you went on to Flickr, you'd on a license that's currently listed in the image that you were looking at. But if you under multiple terms, then the user could choose which term they wanted to.
Yeah, the distinction. I know that these were irrevocable, but I wasn't sure what would happen if you put a more restrictive license on it. But so you could, but it doesn't revoke the original terms of the original license that you put on it.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
So our 6 main licenses is Creative Licenses framework, and they all start with CC for Creative Commons, and then they all have BY for attribution as who is it by. So all 6 licenses require attribution. It's a little tiny font, but don't worry, I'm going to go through each of them individually, so you don't have to read this. I just wanted you to see those are all 6 of the licenses, and the very top is CC BY, which is the most lenient, and they are getting more restrictive as you go down all the way to the bottom to the CC BY and C and D. So let's take a look at what that means. For BY, this is the most a license. It allows you to do the most. So you can download content, share content, you can remix it, change it up, and can even use it commercially. So we can take a look at the D for this license. If I can here. Since this is a human readable summary of this license, it doesn't substitute for actually reading the license, though. Reading the license is a lot more difficult than reading this summary, so I'm still working on getting through those. So your read summary, it does say that you need to include a user. You can't apply technological measures such as DRM to the work. And then they all have these little notices at the bottom to let you know that exceptions are permitted, like fair use. If fair use applies, you can still apply it. There's no warranties, so if you're remixing some content and someone else mislabeled their content, you're still responsible, even though they mislabeled it. So it's good to kind of go back as far as you can to the source on those. Also, other rights like publicity, privacy, and memorial rights are not included in Creative Commons. So an example of that would be if I took a photo of a person, then there's some creativity to my taking that photo, but I would still need to ask their permission if I wanted to use that photo to advertise my photography business. So go back. And these 3 things here provide credit to the original and the license, and no changes if you made them is applicable to all of the Creative Commons licenses. And we'll talk about attribution a little more later. And no changes is pretty important to keep up with yours, and we'll talk about that some as well. This is the C by SA, and SA means share alike. This you can still download and app the work. You can do it commercially still and distribute work. But if you do make changes to the work, you have to license your work CC by SA. If you're not making any changes, then the part is not applicable. By using it, it would just remain CC by SA. So it's this question, and let me know what you think.
following just the audio. Can we include a CC BYSA photo on the cover of a collection of maps when the map collection is under all rights reserved and does not include a Creative Commons license? Just get so far.
I'll give you a minute to think about it. So, that I anyway.
I just got sent a no privately.
All right. How I this question. Actually, there was a lawsuit about this. So, this map company put a share-alike photo on the front of their map, this Kappa map group, and the photographer sued. Things came out of the suit, but the biggest thing was understanding the share-alike question. So I said, share-alike only applies making a derivative work or when you're adapting the work. So if you create a collective work where you collection of things, so not a derivative, then it does not apply. And that's what this lawsuit said. They ruled in favor of the map group. It was a question of non-commercial because you can use commercial stuff if it's share-alike. It was just a question of how you interpret share-alike. So the maps it's a collection of maps. So each individual map can stand alone. The photo itself could stand alone, and they did not consider that a derivative work. The map collection is not a derivative of the photo. So in that case, yes. In this case, yes, you can do that. So to me, hear that. So what a collective work? Map book is one example. Other examples include anthologies or encyclopedias. So you can use any 6 of the CC licenses in a collective work. If you've got NC content in there, though, you still can't use it commercially. So can a course be a collective work? Yes, and some, I'm not sure. I don't have an answer for this one, but I have some thoughts. I think that is how you create your course. So if you have standalone modules, then each standalone module seems to me that could make collective work. No individual module is dependent on the other and could be used independently. But you do have to. It's not necessarily a collective work, so I think it all depends on how you arrange your course. Anyone have something more to add? And we'll look at some more. So this ND is no derivative, so you just can't change it at all. This license is not. It doesn't fall under the definition of open education definitions out there, but typically it doesn't, just because the open education stuff, most people think you need to be able to adapt it, and you can't adapt the derivative content. And the CC by NC, we're on the fourth one now, and a question related to this one as well, because some of these gray areas in some of this. So we'll take a look at this NC a little closer. So it's NC stands for non-commercial, and you can't receive monetary compensation for NC license work. So you can still download, adapt, share, and all of that, just no commercial. Printing company fill a customer's order to make photocopies of non-commercial content and charge for the printing. If non-commercially licensed content is going to be used non-commercially, so that there's some money being made on the printing.
I got a not sure.
Okay, the lawsuit related to this one. So the past FedEx used to be Kinkos, I believe, and there was a lawsuit about everything with all rights reserved content, where Kinkos printing course packs, and Kinkos lost that because they said you can't print course packs all rights reserved material. But in this case, the content is meant to be shared, and the Creative Commons folks said you should be able to contract out these things, because not everyone will have a printing press or a copier, for one thing. In this particular situation, Great Minds is the publisher, and they sued FedEx for making some copies for a nonprofit school. I think it was public school. The school just needed some copy of this material for their students. The case was dismissed recently because he argued that it's the intent of non-commercial is to allow this to happen. You could make it like it could really it could get possible to use NC if this were to pass, because then you could say, well, you can't email NC content because then your email is provided by a commercial company. So CC argued that this is permissible, and I think that's probably a good thing for you. What bookstores can they sell NC licensed textbooks?
Probably I got a yes.
So we've got some no's. We've got at least one yes. Looking. Practice is for this to happen, for this to bookstores are doing this all over the U.S. I think the catch is that the bookstore is not allowed to make a profit from this. You can cover your costs when you sell the book in the bookstore. So I imagine that Jeff's more about this than I do because he probably deals with this a little bit more. So you feel free to comment if you'd like.
Well, I mean, this is one of those up in the air questions. I think that if something at cost and you can prove that you're selling something at cost to just print the material, then you're basically doing the same exact thing for a student that you're doing when it comes to FedEx and Great Minds, that you're just printing it out. If you line with markup, like Marianne is saying, what counts as the costs? That may not hold up in court nearly as well as if you were able to just say, okay, so here is exactly how much it costs for one of us to this through a printing press, or we have this outside print on demand contractor, and here's what they charge us.
Yeah. What cost is the big question on that? So that's a good answer, Jeff. So the next license, we're on the fifth license. It's starting to get more restrictive now. So CC BY, NCSA, non-commercial, and share alike. So you can't use a commercially, and derivative works must also be licensed, CC BY and CSA. There's more. INCND, commercial, no monetary compensation, and no derivative works. No derivative means that you can't change it at all. This would still apply. I can always ask permission. So collective works a little bit, and what that means. It's a little tricky if you start adapting content in Creative Commons and remixing your works. I've heard some people describe it as blending content. We'll think about this a little bit more. You have to make sure that your licenses work well with each other when you're mixing licenses within a single work. So like I mentioned before, the share alike part is only applicable to adaptive or derivative content. The complexity of copyright law is that when you license your adapted work, you're only licensing the changes that you made. So that's another reason in the first license slide I said keep up with your changes, because work has one license on it, but your rights is only to the changes that you made. I was looking for definitions, like very specific definitions of adapting and remixing, and I didn't come up with a lot of examples, but the last bulleted point is part of the Wiki Commons. So if you are putting to a video and you sync it, then that is considered an adaptation, which makes sense to me because you're changing the timing on the music. So take a look at this a little bit more. You can use, I'm going to maybe not show this one to you right now, but maybe you can explore this one. It's in the UK. It's created by this websites and also Creative Commons UK created this tool. It helps you to figure out which licenses are compatible with one another and how to license your work when you've used multiple licenses in your work. But only it doesn't work for me, like it doesn't reset or something. So I encourage you just to play around with this one on your own and see if you like it. But one that I like a lot better. Chart here is the one that I like the best. Derivative works cannot be remixed or they can't be adapted. So you see all these X's for everything that's no derivative. It's X for everything. So if it's X, you remix it. If you had by and CCI. If you see where those intersect, then this can be used in the same remixed work. So I've put a link to this chart in the chat box, and I'm going to ask some questions on it as well.
Yeah, I tried to put that link in the chat box, and it did not work.
No.
Would you mind copying it and pasting it in?
Sure, maybe I can. Is that working?
Anything in the chat box from you?
Try again.
If you, oh,
how about
okay. Yeah, that one was fine. Oh, I'm wondering what happened there. Compatibility. Yeah. I went wrong. Sorry.
That's all right. So I'm remixing some content, and I want to combine a photo that's licensed CC by NC with some text that's licensed CC by SA. Is that compatible? Can I mix those two?
Oh no, in my chat. Someone who's answering, make sure that you hit send to all panelists, or to at least the host and presenter. Know privately. Getting a nose.
So that's easy to use. So I see all I know so far, which is the correct answer. So these two licenses just are not compatible with one another because they SA allows for non-commercial and NC does not. They just don't gel together if you try to mix content from each of these licenses. So, sometimes when you put the format in there, it really doesn't matter the format. Also keep in mind you can always ask permission. I mean, the point of the Creative Commons license is so that you don't have to ask permission, but sometimes when people license their stuff, they don't realize the restrictions that the license is going to put on their users. So sometimes they're happy to grant permission, or sometimes they relicense their work. So if creating an anthology of readings where I am not making any changes to the content, can I then combine CC by NC with CC by SA?
Yes, is privately. Yes, is across the board.
So people I see at least one yes, I see some no's. Depend if they're different chapters. This one, Anthology is a collection, so it depends on if making any changes, which means you're not adapting anything. In each chapter, someone mentioned chapters. If each chapter in this anthology or each section in this anthology can be any license. So NC and SA can't be remixed. If you're not remixing, you can still use it in the same collection. So, which licenses you can use together when you're remixing content. But after you remix the content that is remixable, then you have to figure out how to license your own work. So if you're using CC BY content and CC BY SA content in your adaptation, then how should you license your work?
Question for chat, right? Oh, okay.
One guessing one.
Just for CC BY SA. Oh, another one.
Okay. You usually take, if there's more than one licensing when you're remixing, even if it's not SA, usually take the more restrictive of the license so that it will look like you can things with the content that you can't. So whenever you have SA content, like if you use CC BY SA, then you need to license your adaptation or your derivative work or your remix with CC BY SA as well. So that's the right answer on that one. CC license chooser tool. Earlier in this session, if I link, hopefully it will take us to this tool. So here's a great little tool. It just helps you it asks simple questions. So do you want to allow adaptations? You can say yes or no. Do you want to allow commercial uses of your work? You can yes or no. And it starts to build what the license is down here. And you get the icons for this. So so this is non-commercial. And I did, and we are adaptation, so it's C, NC. You learn this little optional thing that will help others to know how to attribute you, and that's pretty neat because it puts a little metadata in there. We could kind of do one. One can see it's building it out at the bottom under this little icon. It's starting to build out my attribution. You can add your URLs and everything. So it starts building this out for you. If you have a place where you can enter HTML, it gives you this HTML you can use, or you can copy and paste this attribution in if you want to just use text. There's the attribution part of the license. Times the copyright owner will tell you how they want their works to be decided, so I would always consider that when you're doing your citations or your attributions. And there are a few other sources for you here. This pooling ideas is a nice, it's very nice graphically for you to see how to do some attributions. This best practices is normally used. There's flexibility in how you do your attributions. You could APA style. You have to do them exactly like I've done this one. I tried to be a good example. So for this one, we've got the best practices. They have this tassel thing. So title, author, source, and license. For my attribution for this background image, you can click Skytitle. It's by Sunny Gu, author. So when I clicked the title, it went to the source. And click Sunny, it's going to go to the author's page on Flickr. And if I click documents, then it will take me to the actual deed. That's the best practices things. And there are there's different versions of the Creative Commons license. Right now we're on 4.0, and different versions just exist because copyright changes over time, and because as a community we talk about what these licenses to mean, and so that we can clarify them. So that's how we get different versions. And if you get some retail, you can take this wiki link and it will show you how the attribution requirements change between the versions. Like some of them don't require title or something like that. But just stick with this best practices. Here's some lawsuits. We talked Great Minds already, and we talked about this one with the Kappa Map group. Virgin Mobile one was cover publicity or privacy rights. They used a photo. I think it was a photo of a minor even. They used it in a phone advertisement because it was Creative Commons license, but the license doesn't cover that. So that became part of the suit. It's Curry when the these CSA photos were posted on that had been posted on Flickr were used in a commercial tabloid, and the court said you can't do that because these are NC photos. And finally, this newspaper got some. They used some all they did wrong is just they didn't provide attribution. The photographer was actually awarded some for this, since that was attributed properly. So they're being held up in court, and it's interesting to see where everything is going. So last slide, yep, that's it. So do you have any questions for us?
And please just type these into the chat and be sure to change your send to all panelists so that everybody can see it. A copy of the recording. What I'm going to do is put this on our training and development page. I will link that out to everybody. And here we have an archive of every webinar we've put on. You can see that March 27th's webinar is already up. The WebEx archive is there and the presentation slides are there. And you see something very similar as soon as WebEx processes this and provides the archive. Oh, to go back to the attribution slide for a second, Denise?
Sure.
just in case anyone who registered missed it today, I'm going to send out the link and the slide to all registrants, if that's okay with you, Denise.
Yes, that's fine.
Cool. Just email this to me, and I'll be able to do that. Do you have any questions about the attribution slide, or are you just looking for a particular thing on here? Is there some standard of what you should include and how prominent it should be? So this is within attribution. What is a proper attribution, right?
Yeah. I mean, the best practices one is the best one to I think, to rents. But there's some flexibility, so it doesn't have to be like I put mine on the image itself. A lot of folks don't like to put it on this page. You could a movie that's probably going to be at the end of the film, or so it wouldn't be probably right there on each frame of the film or anything like that. So it's kind of what people typically do with each format. If you don't like the aesthetics of putting it on the image, you can put that at the end. You could follow any style. So if doing an image in APA style, if you're doing it like in a paper, you put like figure 1 and then a description of the image and the image and some copyright information, so you could follow that format. It would be okay. The important thing, I think, is the link to the license. Every single one of them always requires the author. If you can put a link to the author, that's great. Not require title, but I recommend putting the title in as well.
Also included a link to the Open Washington Attribution Builder. This was built by Bo-Young Kim at the SBCTC, which is Community and Technical Colleges in Washington, and getting a lot of questions on how do I attribute stuff. And so she built a thing where you can put in the title, the URL to that title, author, a URL to the author's page, and then you just select the license. You can say whether or not something's a derivative of an original work and put the license, put the URL there, and the attribution will pop up at the bottom. You can have just copy the text, or you can copy the HTML code if you're going to be putting it directly on a website. So Washington really helps with that too.
Page,
yeah.
if you think that would to see something.
Anyway.
So it's very they have a lot of graphic images in here, so or pictures, I guess is what I'd say. And this an example, you can see how this one's done for this image. So so that's helpful.
Okay, I got a question privately. I'm going to post it out to all participants. Could you give more explanation on choosing the appropriate license for a product which is an adapted work of two different types of CC license?
So you take the more restrictive license of the two. So when we looked at that list, very beginning, if I go way back to the beginning, most lenient, and it gets more restrictive as you go. So if licenses are compatible, they do both need to be compatible. If you're remixing them, just choose the most restrictive one. Or if who you're thinking of, we can. So the most restrictive one would be CC by CSA for that.
Mm-hmm. They said that's very helpful. Thanks. Yeah, and it's interesting when you get into open licensing. There's a certain amount of Creative Commons licenses, and they seem pretty easy to understand. But just like if you look at a board game or something like that, and then you suddenly look at the rule book and you're like, oh, these rules seem fine, and then you try to put it into action, suddenly the interactions between different rules start clashing together. So it's nice to do this kind of deep dive into open licensing to explain what happens when you start putting these together. We get the icons for different licenses to be included as attribution. When you do it on the creativecommons.org/choose, they give you it there. Let me just go to that.
Yeah.
Yeah, it'll give you the icon and it'll give you the web code to put the icon directly on a web page if you felt like doing that instead.
So download them on the Creative Commons website as well.
Ah, yeah. Yeah. Oh, this said. Cheryl Johnson says, is there a cost for any of the licenses?
There's no cost.
Yeah, Commons is a nonprofit that functions on donations and grants. So it's not an organization that charges for you using the licenses. It's not like, for example, if you have to get like 100 ISSNs for journals or something like that, sometimes those agencies can charge you a little bit to do it, but with Creative Commons, you just use them. When you saw Denise open up the human readable version, you got this little pop-up that said, hey, please donate. We've been on donations. That is part of how they survive. Lori says, what about student work? I'm asking students to publish online, some research and some create originals.
So I'm not sure what the question is, but you can mix original content with Creative Commons licenses. That would be fine.
Oh, should open license their work?
It's really up to the student as to what they want to do, and up to your assignment as well. There's a big movement right now called Open Pedagogy.
That's a link to that.
Yeah, they're really innovative and creative assignments that you can come up with for students, and it's kind of unfortunate if it stays within the classroom and isn't shared with the world, because students can create some really fabulous stuff sometimes. So I think it's if the students want to license this openly, you could create an assignment where you require them to, I suppose. I think that's or it could just be optional for them. Might be the more polite way to do it. Sometimes students create content for the course itself that other students can use in future iterations of the course. So that's done quite a lot. You have students edit a Wikipedia article, then that's they have a share alike license, so that content's going to be.
There's also a really long article. I really like really long articles. Mike Caulfield back last year about the idea of having a choral explanation of a particular topic, where students are creating OER by contributing to a larger conversation with experts who are also contributing to that conversation. That was a cool way to look at it. That could be as easy as a WordPress blog with some licensing to it. I'm not seeing any other questions in here. Thank you all for coming in, and if you have any questions about ALG, aka Affordable Learning Georgia, if you're new. Please send them to jeff.galana@usg.edu. That's me. I am glued to my email. And thank you, Denise, for sharing your expertise on this topic. And
You're welcome.
we'll be sharing out the archive very soon. Buddy? And I'll stop the recording.